The humid Florida air hit me like a wall as I stepped out of the Uber. Vacation had been glorious. 7 days of sun, sand, and finally disconnecting from the relentless demands of my software engineering job. My wife, Keisha, and our two kids, Maya and little Leo, were chattering excitedly about their favorite parts of the trip as we hauled our luggage towards the house. Honestly, I was just happy to be home, back in my own bed, and ready to ease back into a routine. We'd arranged for the lawn service to come while we were gone, and I'd set the smart thermostat remotely. So I was expecting a perfectly comfortable, perfectly normal homecoming. The main house was exactly as we left it. Cool, clean, and welcoming. I felt that familiar sense of contentment wash over me. But something nagged at the back of my mind. The guest house. I hadn't thought about it much before we left. It was mostly used for visiting family, and it had been empty for a few months. Just a quick check to make sure everything was still in order, that the pipes hadn't burst or anything. A responsible homeowner thing. "Hey, Keisha, I'm just going to run over to the guest house quickly to make sure everything's all right," I said, grabbing my key ring. "I'll be right back." She nodded, already halfway through unpacking Maya's overflowing suitcase. "Okay, honey. Just holler if you need anything." The guest house was separated from the main house by a small, meticulously manicured garden. Keisha's pride and joy. As I approached, I could hear something. A muffled noise, like a television playing too loudly. That was odd. I distinctly remembered turning everything off before we left. Maybe a stray cat had somehow gotten inside and knocked something over? I fished the key out of my pocket and inserted it into the lock. A wave of unease washed over me. The door seemed stuck. As I jiggled the key, I heard a distinct voice, a shrill and utterly unpleasant voice. "Chris, turn that damn thing down! I can barely hear myself think." My heart pounded in my chest. Chris? Who the hell was Chris? And what were they doing? In my guest house? I finally managed to force the door open. The scene that greeted me was beyond anything I could have imagined. The air inside was thick with the smell of stale cigarettes, cheap beer, and something vaguely resembling unwashed laundry. The once pristine white walls were now stained with what looked like grease, and, was that ketchup? Empty pizza boxes and fast food wrappers littered every surface. The furniture was covered in a layer of dust and grime. It was a disaster. But the worst part was the two people sitting on my sofa, surrounded by the mess. One was a woman, probably in her late 40s, with a sharp, pinched face and a hairstyle that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager." The other was a younger man, slumped beside her, looking like he hadn't seen the sun in weeks. He had a scraggly beard, a stained tank top, and an overall aura of profound hopelessness. Karen, I suspected immediately. I'd seen her around the neighborhood, always with that judgmental look on her face. I just never imagined she'd be living in my guest house. They both stared at me, mouths agape, like I was the one who had just broken into their home. The woman, Karen, was the first to recover. "What do you think you're doing?" she screeched, her voice grating on my nerves. "You can't just barge in here like this." I stood there, speechless for a moment, trying to process the sheer audacity of this situation. "This is my property," I finally managed to say, my voice tight with anger. "What are you doing here? Who are you?" "I'm Karen," she huffed, as if that explained everything. "And this is my brother, Chris. He needed a place to stay." She looked around the trashed room, a flicker of something that might have been shame crossing her face, but it vanished quickly. "A place to stay?" I repeated, incredulous. "This is my guest house. You can't just move in without asking. How long have you been here? She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. We had nowhere else to go. Chris lost his job, and I couldn't just leave him on the street. That's not my problem, I exploded. You broke into my property. This is trespassing. You need to get out now. Chris, who had been silent until now, finally spoke, his voice raspy and mumbled. "Oh, hey man, no need to be like that. We ain't hurting nobody." "You're hurting me," I retorted, gesturing wildly at the mess surrounding them. "Look at this place. You've trashed it. You've been living here illegally for who knows how long." Karen's eyes narrowed. "We're not leaving. Chris needs a roof over his head. You wouldn't deny a man a place to live, would you? Especially a black man. Are you going to be like that, Gabe?" The casual deployment of my race as a weapon infuriated me further. "Get out," I repeated, my voice dangerously low. "Get out now, or I'm calling the police." That seemed to be her cue. Her eyes lit up with a strange, almost triumphant gleam. "Fine," she yelled, grabbing her phone. "I'll call them myself. You're harassing us. You're threatening us. I want you arrested." She started dialing, her fingers shaking with righteous indignation. I watched in disbelief as she spoke into the phone, her voice dripping with false victimhood. "Yes, I need to report a break-in. This man is trying to force us out of our home. He's being aggressive and threatening. We're in danger." My blood ran cold. This was insane. Utterly, completely insane. I could hear Keisha calling me from the main house. She was probably wondering what was taking so long, and I couldn't even begin to explain the level of absurdity that was unfolding in my guest house. This woman was actually trying to get me arrested for trespassing on my own property. Karen continued her performance for the 911 operator, embellishing the story with each passing second. "He's yelling at us. He's saying he's going to throw us out on the street. We have nowhere else to go. Please, you need to send someone here immediately." "Take," she glanced at me, a smug look on her face, as if she had already won. Chris, meanwhile, seemed to be growing increasingly uncomfortable. He shifted in his seat, avoiding eye contact with me. I could see a flicker of awareness in his eyes, a TKDE glimmer of understanding that maybe, just maybe, his sister was taking things a little too far. "Karen, maybe we should just," he started, but she cut him off with a sharp glare. "Shut up, Chris," she snapped. "Don't you dare apologize to this man. We have every right to be here." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This woman was delusional, completely detached from reality. She genuinely believed she was in the right, that she was somehow entitled to live in my guest house. "Ma'am," I said, trying to remain calm, "with all due respect, you are making a huge mistake. This is my property. I have the deed, the mortgage statements, everything to prove it. The police are going to arrive, and they are going to arrest you for trespassing." She laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You think they're going to believe you over me? A defenseless woman trying to help her brother? You think they're going to take your word for it?" The implicit racism in her statement hung in the air, thick and suffocating. She was counting on the biases of the system to protect her, to paint me as the aggressor, the threatening black man violating the sanctity of a white woman's squatting situation. I pulled out my phone, intending to call the police myself, to present my side of the story before they arrived. But Karen saw my action and screamed, "He's going to attack us! He's got a weapon!" Chris recoiled, instinctively raising his hands in front of his face. This was spiraling out of control. I quickly pocketed my phone, not wanting to escalate the situation further. "I'm not going to attack you," I said, my voice strained. "I just want you to leave. Please, just pack your things and go before the police get here." She ignored me, continuing to speak into the phone. Yes, he's still here. He's refusing to leave. I'm afraid for our safety. Please hurry. The siren started a few minutes later, growing louder with each passing second. Karen's eyes gleamed with a manic satisfaction. Chris, on the other hand, looked like he was about to throw up. He started pacing nervously, wringing his hands. Karen, this is going to be bad, he mumbled. Really bad. Don't worry, she said, patting his arm reassuringly. I know what I'm doing. They'll be on our side. I just shook my head in disbelief. This woman was living in a fantasy world, and she was dragging her hapless brother down with her. The sirens grew deafening as the first police car pulled up outside the guest house. Two officers emerged from the vehicle, their faces grim and professional. One was a young woman, probably fresh out of the academy, with a determined set to her jaw. The other was an older, more weathered officer, with the weary look of someone who had seen it all. They cautiously approached the door, their hands resting on their holsters. Karen practically leaped towards them, her voice dripping with urgency. Officer, thank God you're here! This man is trying to force us out of our home. He broke in and started threatening us. The female officer held up a hand, stopping Karen in her tracks. Ma'am, please calm down. We need to understand what's going on here. Who are you, and what's your relationship to this property? I'm Karen, and this is my brother, Chris, she said, gesturing towards the increasingly agitated Chris. We live here. This man is a trespasser. He claims he owns this place, but he's lying. He's trying to illegally evict us. The older officer turned his attention to me. Sir, can you explain your side of the story? I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm and composed. Officer, my name is Gabe Thomas. I own this property. This is my guest house. I was away on vacation, and when I returned, I found these two individuals living here without my permission. They broke into my property and have been squatting here for an unknown amount of time. Do you have any proof of ownership, sir? The female officer asked. Yes, ma'am, I replied. I have the deed to the property, the mortgage statements, everything, on my phone. I can also pull up the records online. I reached for my phone, but Karen shrieked again. Don't listen to him. He's a liar. He's trying to trick you. The older officer gave Karen a stern look. Ma'am, please be quiet and let the man speak. He turned back to me. Go ahead, sir. I quickly accessed my county's property records website on my phone and showed the officers the deed, which clearly listed me and Keisha as the owners of the property. I also pulled up my mortgage statements and utility bills, all bearing my name and address. The officers examined the documents carefully, their expressions becoming increasingly serious. The female officer turned to Karen, her voice cold and professional. Ma'am, these documents appear to be legitimate. Do you have any proof that you reside at this address legally? Karen stammered, her face turning red. Well, no, not exactly. But my brother needed a place to stay. He's unemployed, and I couldn't just leave him on the street. This man should be ashamed of himself for trying to throw us out. The older officer sighed, the weariness on his face deepening. Ma'am, I understand your concern for your brother, but that doesn't give you the right to break into someone else's property and live there without their permission. You are trespassing, and you will be placed under arrest. Karen's eyes widened, in disbelief. What? You can't arrest me. I haven't done anything wrong. This is an outrage. The female officer stepped forward and gently placed her hand on Karen's arm. Ma'am, you need to calm down and cooperate. You are being arrested for trespassing. Karen stiffened, pulling away from the officer's touch. I am not going anywhere. You have no right to arrest me. This is all a misunderstanding. I demand to speak to your supervisor." The older officer, clearly losing patience, stepped in. "Ma'am, you are resisting arrest. If you don't cooperate, we will be forced to use further measures." Karen, however, was beyond reason. She started yelling louder, attracting the attention of neighbors who had started to gather on their lawns, drawn by the commotion. "This is discrimination. This is harassment. You're only doing this because I'm white and he's black. This is a hate crime," she screamed, her voice reaching a fever pitch. I cringed, mortified by the spectacle. This was exactly what she wanted. A scene, a confrontation, a chance to play the victim. I wanted to disappear. The officers, however, remained professional, despite Karen's increasingly outrageous behavior. They attempted to handcuff her, but she struggled violently, kicking and screaming. "Get off me! You're hurting me! I'm calling my lawyer! This is police brutality!" she shrieked. Chris, who had been watching the scene unfold in stunned silence, finally snapped. He lunged forward, pushing the female officer away from his sister. "Leave her alone!" he yelled, his voice surprisingly strong. "You're not going to treat her like that!" The older officer immediately stepped in front of Chris, drawing his taser. "Stand down, sir. Do not interfere with a police officer. You will be tased if you do not comply." Chris hesitated for a moment, his eyes darting between his sister, the officer, and the taser. But the years of pent-up frustration and helplessness seemed to finally boil over. He clenched his fists and charged at the officer. The officer had no choice. He fired the taser. The high-voltage shock hit Chris, causing him to convulse violently. He screamed in pain and collapsed to the ground, his body twitching uncontrollably. The female officer quickly moved to restrain him, while the older officer secured Karen in handcuffs. The whole scene was surreal. Karen, screaming and resisting, being dragged towards the police car. Chris, lying on the ground, still twitching from the taser shock. Neighbors, staring in shock and disbelief. And me, standing there, feeling a mixture of anger, frustration, and profound sadness. This whole situation was a complete unnecessary tragedy. As the police led Karen and Chris away, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered, their faces a mixture of curiosity and concern. I recognized a few of them: Mrs. Henderson from across the street, the Smith twins who always played basketball in their driveway, and old Mr. Johnson, who walked his dog every morning. I felt a wave of embarrassment wash over me. This whole scene had played out in front of my neighbors, exposing a level of chaos and dysfunction that I would have preferred to keep private. I plastered on a weak smile and offered a wave of acknowledgement, but most of them just stared back with a mixture of pity and awkwardness. The police officers briefly spoke to me, taking down my statement and explaining the charges against Karen and Chris. They assured me that they would handle the situation and advised me to contact my insurance company regarding the damage to the guest house. As the police cars drove away, leaving a trail of flashing lights and lingering sirens, I turned my attention to the disaster that was once my guest house. The mess was even worse than I had initially realized. The stench of stale food and cigarettes permeated the air, and the surfaces were covered in a thick layer of grime. It was going to take a considerable amount of time and effort to clean up this mess. Keisha and the kids emerged from the main house, their faces etched with worry. "Gabe, what happened? We heard screaming. Is everyone all right?" Keisha asked, her voice trembling. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "It's a long story, honey," I said wearily, "but everyone's safe. They're gone now." I spent the rest of the day cleaning and sanitizing the guest house, trying to erase the memory of Karen and Chris from its walls. Keisha helped as much as she could, but the task was overwhelming. It took hours to remove the stains, scrub the floors, and air out the rooms. As I worked, I couldn't help but reflect on the events of the day. The audacity of Karen, the helplessness of Chris, the casual racism that had permeated the entire encounter. Firseek, it was all deeply disturbing. It made me realize that no matter how successful I became, no matter how much I achieved, I would always be seen by some people as other, as less than, as a potential threat. I also realized that Karen and Chris were products of a broken system, victims of poverty, addiction, and despair. While their actions were inexcusable, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of sympathy for their plight. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, I finally finished cleaning the guest house. It wasn't perfect, but it was habitable again. I stood in the doorway, surveying my work, and a sense of exhaustion washed over me. I knew that the events of the day would stay with me for a long time. They served as a stark reminder of the inequalities and injustices that still existed in our society. But they also reinforced my resolve to fight for a better world. A world where everyone had a fair chance. A world where no one felt the need to break into someone else's home just to survive. And a world where Karens like that are held accountable for their actions. I just hoped Chris got the help he obviously needed.